Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, let's talk about getting your boat ready and dialed in for rough water. Some of the things that I've learned over the years, not only bass fishing, but also up north guiding in Alaska. Actually heading to Alaska on Friday. And so I've had a lot of experience with rough water, and it's super, super important that you take care of some of the little details when it comes to your equipment before you head out on, say, the Great Lakes. You know, a few years ago, I made my most daunting run that has since made every other long run on any fishery seem like a cakewalk. And that was when we were fishing Lake Erie, going out of Sandusky. And I drove 45 miles across open water on Lake Erie in 4 to 6 footers the entire way. And then of course you got you got a long distance once you get to the Detroit River up to Anchor Bay and St. Clair. It was 95 miles each way, and the bulk of it was in big waves. And you know what? I didn't have any issues at all when it came to my boat. And that's because I know how to rig out my boat to where I'm not going to see any of those issues. And I just maintain things. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the things that are really important to me for keeping my boat and all my equipment working after a big long run and during a big long run. So the very first thing I want to talk about is the bow of the boat. The trolling motor seems to be kind of a weak point on bass boats for rough water. You see a lot of guys come back to the service yards on fisheries such as the Great Lakes during rough water, and it's because they're not setting up their trolling motor to where you're not having a lot of movement. Okay, so as good as trolling motors are, the mount system and all that, you need to make sure that you're shoring this thing up and that you're really adding some extra insurance to this. Okay, so we all know we've got these little Velcro straps. Most companies will include a strap like this towards the bottom of the trolling motor. Still great. You don't want this banging around. You can damage, some of the things inside. I've actually broken some of the magnets in the shroud here in the past because of that banging. But so this is important, to have this down here. But I would say that having the head of your trolling motor secured is much more important, because no matter how good these mounts are, you see so many guys with broken mounts and also the bounce busters punching a hole through their deck. So there's a couple things that I do here for rough water. Is first off, I always put some type of plate or bounce buster, puck down here to protect the bounce buster from actually punching a hole through the fiberglass deck. So that's one thing that I do. And probably the most important thing that I do is I take a cleat. Okay, it's a cleat that's big enough to put a cam strap underneath. Okay, and I can wrap a cam strap around the head of the trolling motor. And the reason why I make the distinction of a cam strap is because a cam strap is the kind of strap that doesn't have a ratchet on it, essentially has that little buckle that the strap runs through, and it has little teeth that tighten so it won't back up. But essentially a cam strap won't over tighten on an object, because you're essentially just tightening it down with your strength. It's not adding extra leverage with a buckle. Okay, because if you add a buckle type of strap here, that could put so much pressure on your trolling motor shaft that you could damage it potentially. Probably not, but you could. And you could also possibly pull this up if you don't bolt it all the way through with big washers inside like I do. But anyways, having this cleat here, or something that you can tie a cam strap to right here to strap this down, is super critical. I've never ever had an instance where my trolling motor bounce buster went through the fiberglass or got even close to it, because I do these two things. And this is probably the most important thing. And it's also just nice to have another cleat there in case you needed to tie off to something, to a dock on the front here. So that cleat is legit, and I don't see nearly enough people putting one there, but it is super, super helpful. And I cut a cam strap down to the exact size that I like, the exact length that I like for this, so I don't have that big old tail, you know, because most cam straps are like, what, 12, 20 feet long or something like that. So I cut them down to size specifically for my trolling motor, and I keep those in the back. So speaking of the back, let's go back here and kind of discuss some of the things that I do on the stern, because the other really important part of the boat that you really need to pay attention to is back here, because you've got this big heavy engine. Okay, you got this heavy engine that has a lot of leverage on all this hardware back here, and so you want to make sure that you're tightening up all of these fasteners that attach the engine to the jack plate, and then the jack plate to the transom here. Okay, all of those need to be tightened up on a daily basis. If I'm going to the Great Lakes and I go for, you know, that run that I made to Anchor Bay from Sandusky was 95 miles. It took me 3 hours and change to get there, one way. And, you know, at the end of the day, coming back, you know, I made sure that I went straight to the back here and tightened up everything. And you know what? After a long day on the water battling rough seas, you can tighten these up even if you just tightened them up the night before. You know, everything will loosen up in that type of scenario. So make sure that you tighten things up. Never, ever, ever go out on a massive lake when you expect rough water without tightening up these fasteners on the back. And that goes for also the power poles too. You want to make sure that none of the fasteners on the back of the boat have any opportunity for loosening up to fail. And another thing that Phoenix actually does that's really, really special, and I think it's really important, is they actually double up on all of these bolts from the factory. The other boat brands that I've ran before only put one bolt here, okay? But Phoenix doubles up on a lot of these high impact, you know, fasteners locations. And so I think that is super cool. And if you have the opportunity to do so, definitely add another bolt for extra insurance. I mean, gosh, it's amazing that these boats survive what they do in rough water. And so, you know, just having one bolt on the top and, you know, on each side of the top and the bottom just doesn't seem right to me. So Phoenix does it right with those extra bolts. But that is a big key back here. Also, just check your steering system too. I remember my rookie season at Lake Champlain, I was making a 70-mile run down to Ticonderoga, and I remember as they're calling out numbers, I look back and one of the fasteners on my steering system, I can't remember exactly which one, it had actually gotten loose, and I thankfully I caught it, went back there, tightened it up, and then, you know, made that long run. So it's just really important to pay attention to everything on the back here. And, you know, one thing, you know, I mentioned the power poles. One thing that I've experienced in the past is if you don't have these bolts tightened here, you can have the power pole in rough water kind of tilt towards the engine, and then you're going to scratch your engine. So you don't want to do that. So always make sure that everything is tight back here. I just can't express that enough. And also make sure that you got, you know, a spare prop in the back. That's always something you need to have. My suggestion is in rough water, definitely give a 4-blade prop a try. I find that in most boats, now the Phoenix 921 Elite tends to ride great with a 3-blade in all conditions. But some other boats that I've run in the past, the 4-blade was so far superior as far as handling in rough water, because you could slow the boat down on a dime and speed up on a dime, and that allowed you to have maximum control over each individual wave. And so definitely, you know, a lot of times I'll keep. Right now I've got a 3-blade as my spare, but if I'm going to the Great Lakes, I definitely carry a 4-blade with me, because oftentimes I'll swap that out if I'm expecting severe weather. Now, if it's flat calm and you just might experience a little bit of rough weather, maybe there's a storm going through, 3-blade is going to do just fine. But if you're expecting all day long to be battling big waves, 4-blade is actually probably the best way to ensure that you've got good boat handling. But yeah, that's the stern. There's not a whole lot that I do back there. Again, I keep some extra cam straps in case something happens to the power pole pumps or something like that, and I lose pressure. That means that the poles will actually be able to you know, deploy, you know, without any control of my own. So I make sure that I have some straps so I can actually you know, tighten those up in that event. I haven't had that happen, but I've heard stories from guys where their power pole pumps you know, burst. The pumps didn't burst, but there was a leak in them, and once that hydraulic fluid leaves, you know, if the poles are you know, not covered, they're not in covers, they can just deploy. And I remember I had one friend that had a power pole deploy, and pretty much the whole spike was gone because it deployed on the road and he didn't know about it, and it just ground down to nothing. So when I'm trailering, I always have the covers on to completely eliminate that issue. But when I'm on the water, if that ever happens, I have cam straps to be able to tighten those down and to make sure that I can get back to the ramp without having those be all loose and everything. Of course, any fasteners at all that you have when it comes to your electronics, also extremely important to make sure that those are tightened. Tighten every single thing up here, okay? Like I can see I got some looseness right there. I got to tighten that up. But it's all about making sure that all of these fasteners are nice and tight. Adding Loctite, you know, the blue stuff, because you're gonna eventually want to loosen, you know, bolts on your boat. I never put red on pretty much anything on my boat because that's a little bit more permanent. But the blue Loctite, which is, you know, temporary, that's what I like to use on all this stuff. But other than that, I think that is pretty much it for rough water. It's just all about making sure that none of your equipment is loose and moving around. Movement equals failure. You know, if you allow it to move enough in rough water, it's gonna fail. It's gonna break, and something's got to give. So any type of you know, shaking or you know, movement at all is definitely not what you want. So anything you can do to eliminate that is going to help you out on the water, and it's just going to help you focus on fishing, which is the most important part. Well, actually, the most important part in rough water is getting to your location and getting back safely. So it helps you focus on that task at hand, but also fishing too. But anyways, guys, just figured I'd share some thoughts on how I keep my boat intact during rough water situations. And so if you have any questions or comments, make sure you drop a comment below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and I'm going to see you guys out on the water. Make sure you trust the process.